Scorpio, I want to speak to you for a moment in a way that feels honest. Because what's moving through you right now doesn't need noise, it needs recognition. As April 13 begins to blur into April 14, something internal starts shifting, quietly, almost beneath your awareness, yet strong enough that you can feel it in the way your thoughts linger a little longer than usual. You might not have words for it yet, but there's a subtle tension, like something inside you is trying to come into focus. It shows up in the pauses, in the moments when you catch yourself revisiting the same idea, the same feeling, the same memory, as if your mind is circling something important, waiting for you to finally face it directly. And maybe you've noticed this, how certain emotions don't fully leave even when time has passed. How some connections, or even just the idea of them, still hold weight in your chest. It's not random, Scorpio. There's a pattern here, something that has been repeating quietly, asking for your attention in ways that are easy to overlook until they become impossible to ignore. Because this shift you're sensing, it didn't begin today. It's been forming through a series of small, almost invisible moments. The times you chose to stay silent, the times you adjusted yourself to keep something stable, the times you felt the truth but decided to wait. Each of those moments added something, layer by layer, until now, you're standing at a point where something inside you is ready to turn. And it's not loud, it's not dramatic, it's simply clear, in a way that feels both unfamiliar and deeply known at the same time. Scorpio, if something in you is starting to move, even just slightly, comment 777 below. Because what you're feeling right now is only the surface of something much deeper. And once you begin to see where this pattern truly comes from, everything starts to shift in a way you can no longer unsee. There's a certain kind of familiarity in what you've been feeling lately. Not loud, not obvious, but steady, like something you've already lived through more than once. It shows up in the way your thoughts circle back, in the pauses where you hesitate, as if part of you already knows how this plays out. You start thinking, weighing every angle, turning one small decision into something that carries weight far beyond the moment. And somewhere in that process, time stretches, action gets delayed, and what could have been simple begins to feel heavy. It's a pattern that feels almost responsible, almost careful, yet it quietly keeps you in the same emotional space. Then there's the way you position yourself around others, how naturally you adjust, how easily you read what they need and respond before even asking what you need. It feels like strength, like awareness, like control. But over time, it creates a subtle distance between you and your own center. And you've felt this before, haven't you? Staying a little longer than your energy agrees with, holding on just a bit past the moment where clarity first arrived. Not because you don't see it, but because something in you leans toward what's familiar, even when that familiarity feels tight. That's the part that begins to surface now. The realization that this isn't about one situation, one person, or one moment. It's a rhythm, a loop, something that has repeated enough times to feel almost natural, almost like part of who you are. But look closer, because what you're experiencing isn't about being stuck in circumstances. It's about being accustomed to a certain emotional atmosphere, the overthinking, the adjusting, the staying. They all carry a texture you've learned to recognize as normal. And once you start to see that, even just slightly, something shifts. Not dramatically, not all at once, but enough to make you pause in the middle of the pattern. Enough to create space between you and what used to feel automatic. Because if this is something you've been living with for a while, then the real question isn't why it keeps happening. It's what part of it still feels familiar enough to hold on to. And that's where things begin to go deeper. And when you stay with that pattern a little longer, something deeper begins to reveal itself, something quieter, more personal. Because what you've been holding on to doesn't always live in the person or the situation or even the memory itself. It lives in the way it made you feel when everything still felt aligned. You remember the feeling more than the details. The warmth of being understood without explaining too much, the subtle sense of being chosen, the calm that came from knowing your presence mattered. That feeling settles into you, and over time, it becomes something you start to seek again, even if the source of it has already changed. It's easy to say you're holding on to someone or to a moment, but if you slow it down, you start to notice something more honest. What keeps pulling you back isn't them. It's the version of yourself that existed in that space, the way you felt open, the way things seemed to flow without resistance. And then there's another layer, the part that feels needed, the part that feels significant when someone relies on you, when your energy fills a space that would otherwise feel empty. That sense of purpose, of being important to someone else, carries weight. And letting go of that can feel like losing more than just a connection. There's also comfort in familiarity, even when it feels tight. A known emotional rhythm can feel safer than stepping into something undefined, something where you don't yet know who you are going to be. And that's where the tension quietly builds, between what you already understand to be true and what your emotions still reach for out of habit. Because deep down, you already see it clearly. You know which parts no longer align, you've felt the shift, you've sensed the distance growing in ways that can't be reversed. Yet something in you leans back toward that familiar feeling, almost instinctively, as if returning to it might restore something that once felt complete. And that's where the real conflict lives, not in confusion, but in the space between clarity and attachment, between knowing and feeling. You're not searching for the person, you're searching for the feeling they once awakened in you. And as this realization begins to settle, slowly and without force, it starts to reshape the way you see what's coming next. Because what feels like a test ahead may have less to do with what appears and more to do with how you respond when that feeling returns again. It might arrive in a way that feels almost too familiar, a message, a tone, a situation that echoes something you've already lived through before. At first, it doesn't even feel significant, just a subtle shift in the air, like something old, quietly stepping back into your space. And for a moment, everything inside you begins to move the way it used to. The same thoughts start forming, the same emotional pull begins to rise, that instinct to lean in, to respond the way you always have. It's quick, almost automatic, like your body remembers before your mind has time to catch up. But then, something pauses. Not outside, not in the situation itself, inside you. A small, almost imperceptible space appears between what's happening and how you respond. And in that space, there's awareness, clear, steady, and surprisingly calm. You notice the pattern as it unfolds in real time. You see where it used to pull you in, where you would have said yes, stayed longer, explained more, given more of yourself to keep something intact. And for the first time, that pull feels different, softer, less convincing. It's not that the situation changed. The words might be the same, the energy might carry the same weight, the invitation might look almost identical. But you're standing in it differently. There's a quiet strength in that moment, not loud, not forced, just present. You don't rush to fix it, you don't feel the same urgency to hold everything together. Instead, you observe, you feel, and you choose. And that choice comes from somewhere deeper than habit. This is where everything shifts, because what once felt like something happening to you now becomes something you're fully aware of. The pattern reveals itself, not as something controlling you, but as something you can see clearly, almost like watching a scene you've memorized. Except this time, you don't follow the script. And that realization lands in a way that's hard to ignore. You're not reacting the same way. You're not pulled in the same direction. The emotional charge that once defined the moment begins to lose its hold, and in its place, there's clarity. This is what the test actually is. Not a disruption, not a sudden collapse, not something meant to shake your world apart. It's a return, a familiar doorway opening again, giving you the chance to walk through it as the version of yourself you've been becoming. And in that quiet, almost unnoticed decision, you prove something to yourself that no external validation could ever confirm. You see it, you feel it, you know it. You've changed. And once that becomes clear, something else begins to open. Not from pressure, not from repetition, but from a space that feels entirely new, even if it arrives in a way you didn't expect. And then, something begins to open, but in a way that feels almost too ordinary to notice at first. It doesn't arrive with intensity or urgency, it comes through something simple. A conversation that lingers a little longer, a message that feels slightly different, an idea that stays with you after everything else fades. At another time you might have overlooked it. It wouldn't have felt significant enough or aligned enough with what you thought you were waiting for. But now, there's a subtle shift in how you receive it, a kind of quiet recognition that doesn't need to be explained. It's interesting because the opportunity itself hasn't changed that much. It still carries uncertainty, still lacks the perfect clarity you once expected. Yet something in you feels more open, more willing to sit with it instead of immediately filtering it through doubt or over-analysis. You start to notice how these small openings appear, not as answers, but as invitations, a chance to respond differently, to explore something without needing full certainty, to allow movement where you once required complete understanding. And that alone changes the way everything feels. There's a lightness here that wasn't present before. Not because everything is suddenly easy, but because you're no longer holding yourself in the same way. The pressure to get it exactly right begins to soften, and in that space, curiosity starts to take its place. And that's when it becomes clear. The opportunity isn't defined by how perfect it looks, but by how you meet it. The same situation that once felt unclear now feels possible, simply because you are no longer approaching it from the same place. You're not chasing it, and you're not resisting it. You're allowing yourself to engage with it in a way that feels present, grounded, and quietly confident. That shift alone turns something small into something meaningful. And as these moments begin to gather, almost gently, they start pointing you towards something more defined, something that asks a little more of you, something that requires a choice rather than just awareness. And then it becomes clear, this moment isn't about observing anymore, it's about choosing. You can feel it in the way your energy tightens slightly, like something inside you knows this point matters more than the ones before it. You're standing between two directions, but it doesn't feel like a simple external choice. It feels internal, like two versions of you are present at the same time, both familiar, both real, yet moving toward completely different outcomes. One side feels known. It carries the weight of everything you've already experienced, the patterns, the responses, the way you've learned to navigate situations that once felt overwhelming. There's a certain comfort in it, a rhythm your system understands without effort. The other side feels quieter, almost unfamiliar in its calm. It doesn't pull as strongly, it doesn't demand the same urgency. But there's something steady about it, something that feels grounded in a way you're still learning to trust. And this is where the tension lives. Because the familiar side still has a voice. It reminds you how things used to work, how you stayed connected, how you maintained control, how you kept everything from falling apart. It feels convincing, not because it's right, but because it's known. But at the same time, there's another awareness rising. A quieter knowing that doesn't need to argue or explain. It simply exists, holding a different kind of clarity, one that doesn't come from repetition, but from growth. You begin to feel the difference more distinctly now. One version of you reacts quickly, moves from habit, leans toward what has always been done. The other pauses, observes, chooses with intention, even if that choice feels less certain in the moment. And the hesitation you feel, it doesn't come from confusion. It comes from standing at the edge of something new while still feeling the gravity of what's familiar. That pull is real, and it carries history, emotion, and identity all at once. But so does the other side. And in this space, you start to understand something deeper. You're not choosing between two paths laid out in front of you. You're choosing which version of yourself gets to move forward. The one shaped by repetition, or the one shaped by awareness. And as that realization settles in, something inside you begins to align, quietly but firmly, guiding you toward a direction that feels less like reaction and more like intention, leading you back to something you may have set aside for too long. And after all of that intensity, something in you begins to settle. The pressure softens, the urgency fades, and what remains feels quieter, more personal, like you're finally returning to a space that has been waiting for you all along. It doesn't come through anything dramatic. It shows up in small, almost forgotten places. The things you used to enjoy without overthinking, the moments where you felt like yourself without needing validation or explanation. They begin to surface again, gently, as if reminding you of something you never truly lost. You might find yourself drawn back to simple things, a song that once meant something to you, a place that feels grounding, a version of your routine that felt more aligned. And as you reconnect with those pieces, there's a subtle realization forming underneath it all. You were always there. It wasn't that you disappeared or changed beyond recognition. You just placed yourself behind too many priorities, too many expectations, too many adjustments that slowly pulled your focus outward. Over time, that distance grew, not because you were gone, but because your attention kept moving away from where you truly felt connected. And now, as you begin to shift that attention back inward, everything starts to feel a little clearer. Not perfectly defined, not fully resolved, but steady in a way that feels real. There's no need to rebuild yourself from the ground up, no need to search endlessly for something missing. What you're reconnecting with has been quietly present, waiting for you to notice it again, waiting for you to give it space. And in that space, there's a different kind of strength, one that doesn't come from pushing or proving, but from recognizing what already belongs to you, what has always belonged to you. You start to move differently from here, more aware of what feels right, more grounded in what actually matters, more attuned to your own rhythm instead of everything around you. And as this sense of connection deepens, slowly and naturally, it begins to shape how you step forward next, not from pressure or repetition, but from a place that finally feels like yours, leading you into what this shift has been preparing you for all along. And now, as everything settles into place, there's a different kind of stillness around you, one that feels earned, not empty, not uncertain, but steady, like something inside you has finally aligned without needing to explain itself. April 13th into April 14th carries this quiet threshold, and you can feel it, not as pressure, but as presence. You've seen the patterns, you've felt the pull, you've stood in the space between who you were and who you're becoming. And now, there's a sense that nothing needs to rush, because the clarity is already here. It lives in the way you pause before reacting, in the way you recognize what once controlled you, in the way your energy no longer leans toward what simply feels familiar. These shifts might seem subtle from the outside, but internally they carry weight, the kind that changes direction without needing force. Scorpio, this is where your power feels different. It's quieter, more grounded, less about holding everything together and more about choosing what actually belongs in your space. There's a calm confidence in that, something that doesn't need validation to exist. You've reached a point where the path in front of you isn't something you need to figure out all at once. It unfolds through the choices you make in moments that feel almost ordinary, yet hold everything. And maybe that's the real shift here. Not something dramatic, not something that announces itself loudly, but something internal that changes the way you meet what comes next. A decision made differently, a response that comes from awareness instead of habit, a quiet step that leads you somewhere new without needing to prove anything. So you stand here, at this threshold, with everything you need already within reach. And the next move becomes less about searching and more about choosing. Scorpio, are you choosing your old self or your new path? Comment, I choose change. And if something in this moment resonates with you, you can stay connected here, like, subscribe, or simply return to this space whenever you need to remember where this shift began.